appears I've caught a case of being a Knicks fan. My options are limited here. I could either concede and become a laughingstock, or I could search for a cure. I guess I could give Persona 3 a fair shake. It's not like Knicks fans are waiting for anything at this point.
I love the opening to Persona 3. A bunch of animated cutscenes in front of you in the first hour as you realize the reason you were sent to Tatsumi Port Island. After some explanation and research of your own, you discover that there is a secret time during the day known as the Dark Hour. Something only a select few can see, and what has most likely been the cause of all the traumas and accidents of late.
What seems to be the problem today?
You have also awakened to a hidden power known as a persona. This is the manifestation of your inner self, used to fight against the shadows during this hidden time frame. The dorm you're staying at is full of these persona users with the common goal to end the Dark Hour. The way to do so, according to our trustworthy chairman, is to defeat the 12 big shadows that only appear on the night of the full moon each month. By climbing the giant labyrinth-like tower Tartarus, you seek out the truth of what caused the Dark Hour, what's causing all these people to come down with apathy syndrome, who is this random child that keeps appearing at your bed in the middle of the night, and what lies at the top. The plot laid out here at the start is perfect, and it's fed to you slowly over a couple weeks in-game, so it's not overbearing. I really enjoy how all the questions you want answered become clear once the full moon hits and chaos breaks loose. I especially love the atmosphere during the Dark Hour. It's all gloomy due in large part to the art direction. With these cutscenes, you get a lot of greens and blacks, giving a pretty ominous tone. There are a lot of these close-up shots of the different characters, which leads to a feeling much more lonely and personal. Of course, this is a PS2 game, so in-game it doesn't look crystal clear all the time. However, they certainly get the job done to give off that creepy vibe that you're looking for. I'd almost say the low-res visuals add to that flair in this case. After the opening, however, the next 25 hours are much slower. Very little happens plot-wise here. Seriously, once you reach the second half of the game, it's mind-blowing how much stuff happens compared to the front half. It's these 25 hours or so that annoys me to no end. This amazing idea for a plot they set up is grinded to a screeching halt in this 4-month time period. In comparison to this game's sequel, Persona 4, while the start is still slower paced, there was always a new plotline to be interested about, with a new character being introduced or a new development of the plot being made. However, we really don't learn much in Persona 3's first half besides the vacation trip they take to Mitsuru's father's place. We learn a lot of backstory here, and gain Aigis as a character. However, after that we're back to the slow grind for another month or so. Speaking of a grind... Welcome to Tartarus! After the first boss, the appeal of exploring this place has completely worn off due to the stagnant developments in the story. Without a motivation to explore it besides the vague and broad questions the game already gave us, you find yourself bored and irritated very quickly. All of this could be forgiven if the combat was entertaining. The fundamental concept of the combat works perfectly. It uses a combat system similar to Pokemon, with each shadow enemy containing some sort of strength or weakness. Combating their weakness with various moves is how you inflict damage or even knock down your opponents. Knock down all and you'll get an all-out attack, dealing massive damage. It's a system that should work wonderfully, and does so. 90% of the time. The other 10% I want to pull my hair out. There were multiple missteps taken, which ultimately led to the battle system feeling pretty outdated. All of these things I'm about to point out I believe have been made much more manageable in the portable version. However, to play that version, you're sacrificing the aforementioned cutscenes and character movement outside of Tartarus for a game that's more like a visual novel. So either play a game where its strongest selling point being its story isn't allowed to hit on all cylinders, or suffer through some bad luck. I should probably get my priorities checked. Anyways, for one, you can only control yourself in combat. Your other 3 party members, good luck. You sort of have to guide them into doing a specific attack or spell for you. While it can lead to some fun strategic moments sometimes, for the most part, it's pretty reliant on luck, especially when fighting the floor bosses. Speaking of, second, the floor bosses! A lot of these bosses are incredibly luck-based. There was one instance where I simply lost because my main guy got charmed and couldn't move. When you get charmed in this game, you aren't allowed to take a turn for 3 rotations, meaning you can't adjust for your party members as well, essentially leading to your death most of the time if more than one party member is charmed. It led to me becoming very aggravated simply due to something out of my control. And the most upsetting part is, if you were just able to control your party members, this wouldn't even be an issue. At the very least, in the latter half of the game, the floor bosses became much more manageable and much more reasonable to deal with. Next, the lovely fatigue system. If you and your party members are in Tartarus for too long, too bad. They will all eventually become tired and need to rest up, or they'll become ill. Tell me, what does this mechanic actually add besides annoyance? This was just more of an inconvenience for no apparent reason. At the very least, again, this stopped being a huge issue in the latter half of the game, because your party members become more and more accustomed to Tartarus as they level up, meaning they won't get fatigued. What was the point of this fatigue system if you're just gonna trash it later on in the game? My final problem with Tartarus is the length. Having to climb a tower over 250 floors long with little visual, musical, or story variety led to one of the most tiring experiences I have ever had playing a video game. Persona 4 has these sort of dungeons as well, and while they weren't very different from the concept of Tartarus at a basic level, I at the very least had a reason to want to go through each one. I wanted to save the people lost in the TV. I'm serious when I say, without that motivation of wanting to meet each character and discover what's up with them, these labyrinth-like dungeons feel empty. In Persona 4's dungeons, they also had different themings in both the musical and visual varieties to represent that person's heart. It was a sort of puzzle you pieced together to discover what issue that character in the dungeon was dealing with as you progressed. Persona 3 feels like it just forgot to give that player a sense of urgency to explore the blocks at Tartarus. Even just a motivation of meeting someone at the top of each block would go miles. Switching tacks, let's discuss the part that has left me contemplating if I'm a moron or not. In concept, I like a lot of these characters, but I feel they missed the mark in one way or another with some of these. For instance, this child. He doesn't need to be a complex character, as he's a kid, and his story on paper is intriguing. However, the way it feels with how he's just shoved into the plot just annoys me. He randomly shows up at the dorm one day besides you getting introduced to him once, and he explains almost nothing about himself. There's almost no chance to learn about him besides one cutscene where Ken listens in on Akihiko and Shinjiro speaking to one another. So, when it's revealed that Shinjiro killed Ken's mom, why should I care? Not everything has to be spoken aloud, but in this case, more character interaction and time to reveal his backstory would have done wonders. Doesn't help that his personality might be as interesting as waiting for milk to expire. How about another one, Akihiko? I love his demeanor, and his character, and how he handles Shinjiro's death, and everything about him, honestly. However, he doesn't even have a social link. In fact, none of the male party members do. Unless you're playing the portable version where some of the male party members get social links, but in that case, you're giving up a lot just to experience those. Maybe they were just running out of time in development, or possibly just feeling a little bit gender biased that day.
Just for today.
But I think this ultimately led to the male members feeling more disconnected. This means that the only time you really have a chance to learn about these members are through the main story sequences where they're involved, or an extra cutscene developers just threw in at random. Now, how about the competition Ken has for the most bland personality award? Fuka! In general, I'm just not a fan of how they handled her. Her character by itself is boring, and their social link feels like almost a waste. They spend time making her cook, which is fine, but then halfway just sort of make her be flustered around you for a solid 3 levels. It's just pretty boring, honestly. I understand they wanted to go for the angle that, oh, she used to feel so useless, but now it's helpful. But it was done in the most dry way conceivable. Shinjiro was killed before I had the chance to fully understand him. He was really mysterious, but sort of cool. However, the second it seemed like he was going to open up a bit, he died. Mitsuru, I apparently just completely missed her social link, so you'll just have to excuse me on that one, but she in general was just alright. And Koromaru, he a dog. The other party members, Yukari, Junpei, and I actually thought were all handled really well. There's a whole story segment dedicated to Junpei with Chidori, even if I believe it felt a bit forced at the start. I found it cool to see his character progression from being arrogant to someone who is much more accepting after the death of Chidori. Yukari, wow, nothing mind-blowing, had a fairly normal social link that was mildly interesting, and her attitude is funny enough that, well, she works. Then for Aigis, the plot of the main story revolves partially around her, making her just much more interesting compared to the rest of the cast, though her social link is confined to just 1 month at the end of the game, which fits, but still kinda sucks that it feels like you have to rush for her. Despite that, she remains an interesting character with the direction they take her. Besides maybe being a tad predictable, I love the idea of a robot becoming human slowly, and it's executed pretty well here. Well, maybe not always. Her voice slowly gains emotion the farther into the story you get, and how she talks begins to resemble coherent human thoughts. It's just nice to watch it play out if nothing else, really. For a lot of these party members, I feel like I wanted to try and connect with all of them, but it was as if something was blocking me from doing so. I spent some time trying to point out why, and honestly I think it was just because there wasn't that connective tissue to make me care. In both Personas 4 and 5, I cared a lot more about a character like Yusuke than I ever would for somebody like Ken or Fuka. I had to save Yusuke from the plagiarizing depths of Madarame, crawl through a dungeon designed around the thoughts and feelings of the person he looked up to, and make him confront that same person face to face. What did they add to make me care about Fuka? The only plot she has going on is being friends with somebody who bullied her at the start, and that's it. Sometimes simple plots are sometimes the best, but here I just found it uninteresting. It's just, I think since this was the first game that went for this sort of style, it was very experimental, and as such, they didn't know how to tie in these characters to the gameplay they had created. Now, the other non-party social links are where you get your money's worth. You have some that are the peak of everything, like my boy Akinari here. You also have some that I believe gave me brain rot. Seriously though, this is my favorite part of the game, seeing all these different social links, whether they turned out good or bad. The time management aspect of trying to complete as many characters as you can really is the highlight for me, even if it has to do with the Gourmet King. I love different social links such as the one on the computer where it's actually your homeroom teacher at school the whole time. There's Tanaka, who's the guy who appears on the TV selling you stuff in both Persona 3 and 4. You get an origin story of sorts for him, which is where I think that's just really cool. There's the little girl Maiko, who's interesting to watch play out, as she literally tries to run away in order to make her divorced parents work together to come find her. Wild. All of these are entertaining in a good or bad way at the very least, which makes me always excited to see what the next person has to say. Once the back half of the game hits, it really begins to shine. September arrives and the music changes. The game enters a point where I finally cared about what was going on. The clash with the members of Strega finally began to reach a head when they killed off Shinjiro. This was a wake-up call for me, despite me not being all too invested in his character. Now, I'm just gonna read out the rest of the plot here, and you'll just have to bear with me for a sec, okay? Okay. It all comes together once you defeat the 12 Shadows. After defeating the final piece, you all celebrate with sushi when suddenly, it strikes midnight, and the dark hour, despite what our trustworthy chairman had said, is still ongoing. You find him with Igus at the entrance to Tartarus, where, after some evil monologue, makes her tie you all up to be used as sacrifices for the coming fall. The chairman tells Igus to kill all of you, but she ends up coming to her, robotic senses and breaks free of the restraints the chairman placed on her. After saving everyone, the chairman ends up getting shot, but at the cost of Mitsuru's dad's life. He then commits suicide.
Oh.
Moving along, a transfer student shows up at school named Ryoji, who seems to be very kind and popular. However, for some reason, Igus has reservations and tells everyone not to trust him. After a lovely school trip and a perfectly normal bathing session, Junpei ends up getting shot for confronting Strega. Chidori then sacrifices herself, causing Junpei to level up his persona in the middle of the confrontation. Honestly insane. Meanwhile, Igus still has her eyebrow raised as Ryoji hangs out with Junpei. She ends up confronting Ryoji later during the Dark Hour, where Ryoji has a revelation of who he actually is. If the Shadows were to be defeated, they'd be reunited as they would come together to form the Messenger for Death, Ryoji, or known as the Appriser. The 13th Arcana of the Messenger, Pharaohs, or the creepy kid who kept appearing at your bed, had gone to become one of the 12 Arcana. 10 years before, just after the Shadows escaped the research facility, Igus battled the 13th Arcana to try and contain him. In order to do so, and being a machine without emotion, she forced a nearby onlooker to be a carrier for the Soul of Death. That nearby body just so happened to be a kid whose parents were now dead and would have a burden to carry for the next 10 years, being you. With the Death Arcana residing inside you, it would eventually lead you back to this town as a transfer student, and then to find the other 12 Arcana so he could become reunited with all of his pieces again. My god! However, because the Death Arcana had been living inside you for so long, it gained human emotion despite being the Death Arcana. Now being whole again as Ryoji, he gives you an ultimatum to either kill him and have you be oblivious to the world ending, or die fighting the god of death, Nyx. Due to our late chairman's actions of lying to us all and being led astray by death itself, you are now responsible for the arrival of Nyx and the end of all life.
Have you ever heard of Hello Kitty Stockholm Syndrome?
You have to choose whether to concede or die trying to save everyone. If you don't want the depressing ending, you fight the god of death. After a month of preparations, you head into Tartarus to confront Nyx. This fight is one of, if not the longest final boss fights I have ever played, and it is all the more climatic for it. Even after going through the fight, it still wasn't enough to win, so everyone is defeated. But, through the social links and bonds you have forged throughout the game, you gain the special power to defeat Nyx. You rise high into the air, head inside the moon, have an insanely epic final showdown to finally seal away death. After this though, you are essentially a walking coffin, and with every passing day is closer to your death. Everyone forgot about the final fight, as all memories of the Dark Hour were erased with the sealing of death. However, everyone made a promise to meet up again on graduation day, and once everyone arrives with their memories intact, they find you with Igus. I love this, as in the last couple days beforehand, the dialogue keeps repeating how tired you are. The social links you reach rank 10 with all comment on how dreadful you look. It's a powerful ending to see how you survived and fulfilled the promise of meeting up with everyone on graduation day. I love this story, but I feel it didn't have the full impact on me it could have. Of course the combat can suck, and not all the characters are as good as I would have liked, but I think Persona 3's greatest flaw is the pacing of the plot. Don't get me wrong, I loved what they did at the end here, even with the ambiguity of it all. However, looking at the plot as a whole, I felt that different plot points were rushed, some took way too long to come out, and some felt so perfect, it hurt to see surrounded by a game that denied its ability to spread its wings. Ryoji, for instance, I thought was a brilliant long and slow build-up for a final encounter with the god of death itself. It tied in perfectly with Igus's character and explained her overall protection of your character. However, the events preceding our trustworthy chairman's demise, they didn't have much of an impact on me. Was I supposed to feel remorse for Shinjiro and Ken? Was I supposed to care about the kidnapping of Fuka and the bullying she had to deal with? It's just, the potential this game has with its ending and the concept of the characters, I can only imagine how much more fulfilling the finale would have been if I cared for the party members. The potential is almost unrivaled, and I believe it is in dire need of a remake. Maintain the same art and cutscene direction, maintain the same regular ending, but spruce up the beginning by adding to the more underwhelming characters to give them more flavor as well as new cutscenes and interaction. Allow the story to have more breathing room by taking advantage of the time wasted in the summer to build up certain events. Combine the two versions of Fez and Portable, adding the best of both. The extra characters and social links missing, and the combat of Portable, and the free movement and the more expressive elements of Fez. Fix Tartarus and its mundane layout to be at least something akin to 4. With that, I believe we would have a fantastic game on our hands.
Man, this thing won't come off.